Here we are, my friends. It is finally the day. Happy Halloween. Happy release day of the language of breath. So I am so happy to share with you a little bit about the language of breath book, how it's different from maybe what you might expect. I've gotten a lot of questions. Hey, Jesse, I've got a few books already on breathwork. Hey, I got your first book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork, and thank you for those of you guys who did that. How is it different from all that? We're going to talk about that today. I'm also going to finally talk about the things that I meant to talk about. I don't know if you guys were here. I don't know. Was it 2 weeks ago? Whenever it was last week when I was doing a YouTube live answering the Patreon club questions. So I'm going to answer those questions. What happened was I kept on losing my internet. So I would start answering the question and then I would drop and they were like, hey, we can't hear you now. We can't see you. So I would start up again. My internet would drop. And so I fixed the problem. My internet is back and it's working. We're just having a great time here. And we are celebrating the release of the book. But I'm also going to answer those questions. I'd love to answer your questions. And I may even read you a little something out of the language of breath to kind of whet your appetite. If you've already purchased your copy, let me know. And thank you so much, by the way. If you haven't, check it out. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's everywhere. I'm very, very, very proud of it. It is distinctively, it's different than a book about breath work techniques and things like that. Hey, Quillman, nice to have you here. So today we're going to start off though. Hey, Dana. Hey, we got all of my favorite names to see on these YouTube lives. So I appreciate you guys being here. And hey, let me know where you're coming from. I'm here in the Midwest. The temperature just changed. The Midwest, there's places on earth that are absolutely gorgeous for many, many different reasons. And I will say that the Midwest is absolutely gorgeous during this time of year. I will put our autumn against most places, spring, summer, fall, any place. We have so many colors. The trees are like fireworks here. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Dana is asking, are you going to do the Audible version? It is on Audible. It's on iTunes. I was not able to voice it myself. And let me explain. Okay. So my publisher, in my first book, I had to hire someone to do the voices for my book because I actually published my first book during the height of that time. I don't know. I don't even know if I can talk about that sort of thing on YouTube anymore, because remember how they were like making it so the algorithm wouldn't find the video. Anyway, it was in 2020. You know what happened in 2020. So I was releasing that book in 2020. And the problem was that there was no studio that I could go to record the book. And I was like, all right, I'm going to hire somebody. So I hired an amazing voice. It was really kind of interesting when you publish these books and you have someone else voice the book for you. You have all these different people who apply and they read a portion of your book. I can't tell you how gratifying it is to hear someone else read your book. But eventually I landed on a person who I felt like, okay, this guy has like a Midwestern feel to his voice. And what was his name? His last name was Strong. And you can find him on Instagram at Strong Voice. So he's a really nice guy. And so he voiced my first book and you could hear his beard. Yes, you can. I insisted that he grow a beard so that he could accurately really read the book. I mean, it's hard to read it in the right tone unless there's some kind of a beard mechanism going on in play. And so, and so actually what's funny is there are certain words. So when you grow up in any place you grow up, I guarantee you there are certain words that you pronounce in a way that is different maybe than it's supposed to be pronounced. I mispronounce certain words and I forget exactly what the word was, but I was listening to him reading my book. I'm like, okay, I want to make sure, because you really want to make sure if someone else is reading your book and you're paying them. You've never met this person. You're just paying this person online to read your book. You want to make sure they're reading it and they're not just like going off and sneezing and farting on the on the microphone. Although that might cause a viral book. Maybe we should get. Maybe it's just one chapter is just one. There's like, you read the book, all of the chapters are the book, and then there's one chapter is just a fart, and then it goes to the next. Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. All right. Strike that from the idea list. But anyway, I was listening to him read my first book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork, and he pronounced a word that I was like, oh, he mispronounced that word. And then I went to the Googles, and they have the way, okay, how do you pronounce it? And he was pronouncing it correctly. And I'm like, no. So I actually called the guy up and I said, hey, listen, I know you're pronouncing the word correctly, but it kind of bothers me. So I had him mispronounce the word on purpose in the way that I pronounce it. I wish I remember what the word was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's like, sure. Yeah. It's your book, whatever you want to do. And so he went ahead and mispronounced it. Now this new book, hey, Paul, nice to have you here, brother. Yeah, this new book is, thank you so much for getting the Audible. Yeah, Brad is a fantastic reader. He was, now the new book. So in this book that in this book, the Language of Breath, the reason why I wrote the book. So after I wrote that first book, it was like when you write a book, there's a reason why there's a million people who have a book, and I was one of them. I had a book that I was working on. I swore I was going to write it, but there's a reason why most people never finish their books, and it's because it's painful to finish a book. Like, it's not just that it's a lot of typing and sitting there. It's like there's a whole emotional roller coaster to writing a book. Like one day you're like, oh man, this book is going to be the best thing ever. And then the next day, for some reason, you get to chapter 9 and you're like, what am I doing? Who am I to write this book? This is ridiculous. I'm a failure. And it is an emotional roller coaster. And the first time you do it, I'm actually working on my next book. I've got so many books in mind now, because what happened to me during that first book was it kind of ripped me out of that comfort zone, and I grew a lot. But I didn't plan on writing another book. And so I was giving a talk at a conference about breath work, and I presented my concept of the language of breath. I said, this is how I teach breath work now. This is how I understand it. I think it's important that we see it this way, as opposed to the way that I used to see it, where it's like a master and a slave, and control your emotions and control your breath. You control your breathing, you control your autonomic nervous system, and you control all this control. And I realized that if all you ever want to do is control, you're never going to get to rest, because everything relies on your conscious control. So you're white knuckling it all the time, and you're like, oh, I need to control this. And I started seeing ourselves as a partnership, as a relationship. And the whole first part of the book, you're gonna start reading this book, and maybe if I have time. So at 2:00, just so you guys know, hang on. I choked on my own spit. Okay. How embarrassing. So at 2:00, so the next hour, we're going to do guided breath work. And I'm going to take you through some language of breath work. But I guarantee you, if you're expecting to learn the language of breath from a session using the language of breath, sorry, guys, you're not going to figure it out. Like, the language of breath is a completely different way of looking at ourselves and looking at breath, because it's no longer a remote control to your nervous system. There's a lot of misconceptions as far as like what we are as the human organism and how everything works together. So there's all kinds of cool things. Um, we'll get to it. I'm sorry. It's like all kinds of cool things. But anyway, so yes, anyway, so I wasn't going to write a book. And then this publishing company reached out to me. They're like, okay, we saw you at this convention where you were speaking. And wow, this was really a cool concept. We've never heard about this before. And we were wondering if you would like to write a book about it. And at first I'm like, okay, well, this is an honor. Thank you so much for asking me. But I had this like huge mental wound festering. I was like, I'm never writing another book because it takes so long and it's so painful and it's but I said, okay, you know what? This is a great opportunity for me to actually do the research that I really need to do to really flesh out this idea, flesh out my whole philosophy. This is stuff I need to do anyway. And at the time, I was thinking about making an online course to teach the language of breath, which is out now. Some of you guys you've already gotten into that, and maybe some of you guys may be with me. We just started this week. We're going to be doing the course together. So if you've not done the course, or if you'd like to get in on that, you can go to the website, jessecoomer.com, or you can go to languageofbreathcollective.com, and we're going to be doing the course together. So every week I check in with you. We do an hour. We just started yesterday, and it's again in conjunction with the book release. So it's an exciting time. Anyway, so I started writing this book, and this is when I fell in love with writing books and research. And you got to understand, I am I love to say, I'm a recovering English professor. I am. I did 11 years, 11 hard years as an English professor. And I'm not, so yes, I did teach literature. I did teach, Shakespeare and Wordsworth and Mark Twain. And, I taught American literature and British literature. But my main focus has always been research and rhetoric. And if you don't know what that, if you're like, okay, I've heard those words. What exactly is that? So research and rhetoric is a whole field of basically, I want to find out how something works, and then I want to learn how to explain it to somebody else. It's basically, if you're a real nerd, if you're a real, so we're getting to know each other. If you didn't know me already, so if you're the type of person who just nerds out, I mean, you can get a PhD in this. I didn't get a PhD in research and rhetoric. I got my master's in it, and ultimately, there's not. I mean, yes, I mean, if a person has a PhD in it, that's great, but I don't think there's a whole big reason to go get a PhD in it. And so I didn't. That's just my opinion. If you have a PhD in research and rhetoric, that's congratulations to you. But basically it's all about how do I do quality research, finding sources that are good? How do you vet sources? How do you do all that stuff? And then how do you explain it to somebody who has not done the research? So that is it kind of revitalized. So writing this book revitalized that for me. And I will say I had so much fun writing this book. It took me years and years of practice and things and a long time to come up with the concepts. And, I give examples of how I worked with clients of basically examples of how to apply what I talk about in the book. I give examples like, when I work with first responders, there's examples of how I've worked with people, for instance, who've had phobias. Like we had, like, it was interesting. There was a time, especially in 2021, when a lot of people were reaching out with phobias. They're like, I've never had this phobia before. I don't know why. I had this one guy who was a CEO. Actually, there was multiple CEOs that reached out during that time with phobias. And a lot of them had to do with travel. And I don't know exactly the root cause, but hey, what was going on in 2021, right? So a lot of people were having sudden fears of driving on the highway. So it was this I can't figure out what it is but for some reason I freak out when I'm on the highway. I can't seem to handle driving around semi trucks. I have very different, so there was a lot of people reaching out, And so I talk about how I worked with some of those people and how I applied the language of breath philosophy to those people, right? As I coached. And here's the thing, when you work with me, so if I coach a person, the first thing they understand, and if you're a breath worker, if you're any kind of coach, I would assume, if you don't already know this, you should know this. The first thing is that you are not fixing them. I don't fix people. I'm not a healer. I'm not a guru. These hands, I mean, they do not. I don't, sprinkle pixie dust. What it is, it's guided self-help. That is what I offer. Guided self-help. I'm here for you. I've learned a bunch of things. Oh, did I just fix you, Paul? Wait a minute, guys. Paul says I so 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 hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. Maybe I am a healer. Oh, whoa, I'm gonna have to start my own commune or my own movement. Uh no, but it really comes down to guided self-help. You have to do the work, right? And so often we want someone else to fix us. We're looking for an easy fix. And even breath work is like that, right? And sadly enough, a lot of times breath work is sold that way. You see it so often, just Jesse the demigod. What are you? Yeah. But you'll see people say stuff like, this one technique is going to make it so you never get sick again, or you never have a bad day, or hey, do you feel stressed? Do this technique. And it's almost as if sometimes they don't say the word cure, but the implication is there, right? So there's this thing called visual rhetoric. And you'll see this, of course, if you follow me on Instagram. Everyone on Instagram, everyone on social media is participating in visual rhetoric. And what is visual rhetoric? Basically, it's sending a message through images, right? So, and it can be different than the text on the bottom, and it generally is. So the classic example is the beer commercials or the truck commercials or the whatever commercials. And it's like these people are having the best life ever. Like the beer commercial. If you go into any bar in the United States or in the world, you will not see the same thing that you see in a beer commercial. In the beer commercial, you're going to see like incredibly attractive people. They're all having a great time. And no one's drinking to excess. They're all acting responsibly. And they're all saying things you don't know what they're saying, but you just assume that it's the most clever thing ever. And then you actually go to a bar and it's just not like that. Maybe in the minds of the people that are there. But I haven't been to a bar in a long time. I'm a father now, so I don't get out much. I do. I try. As a breath worker, I'm very, very blessed that I get to travel a lot and I get to see a lot of people. I get to meet a lot of people. Many of the people on this who I see your face or your name here, I have gotten to meet, and I'm so very, very fortunate. But there are so many other ways to meet people other than go to the bar. But the point I'm making is oftentimes there will be an implication that if you do this simple thing, then it fixes you. The reality is that there is no cure to being a human, right? Being a human is going to be full of challenges and stressors, ups and downs, good times, bad times, all those things. Hey, did I just quote Led Zeppelin? Good times, bad times, I have my share. Anybody? Okay. Today is a little bit like my birthday. It feels like my birthday, at least. Whenever you put something out in the world, it's kind of like it's your baby, right? And hey, you know what? I sang a little bit. We're going to talk about snoring, and one of the most interesting studies, actually 2 studies that came out that I found in conjunction with a snoring, maybe not necessarily cure. For some people, it cured them. For other people, it just reduced the magnitude of snoring. And then it also helped people with sleep apnea. So I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. I promise. We're just having fun. Last little bit about the book, and then we'll talk about the book again here in a minute too. Wait a minute. Okay, Poland is looking good, Quillman. I've been to Poland. When I was in Poland, though, it was dead of winter. I was there actually in 2020. So I was in Poland in January or February of 2020. And as I was coming home, I'll never forget, I was so jet lagged. I worked 2 weeks in Poland, heavy, heavy, heavy work, 18 or 16-hour days. It was just ridiculous. And I was super jet lagged. I came back and there was this new sickness that was going around. And at the time, you just didn't know what anything was all about. Of course, we were all innocent at that time. We didn't know how everything was going to develop. And I just remember feeling so jet lagged. I was like, maybe I've got this new thing that everybody's talking about. My wife is like, shut up, go to sleep. My wife, I think most of the time, starts with shut up and then help me, guys. I need tough love, I guess, maybe. Anyway, I went to sleep and I felt much better the next morning, and I was totally healthy. But I'm glad I didn't go in and say, "Hey, I think I've got this new thing." I had some pretty bad jet lag that time. Anyway, okay, so let's talk a little bit about. Let's see. Last thing about the book. It is for sale. It's on shelves everywhere. It's one of these weird things where, because I went through a publisher, I didn't get to choose whether or not I got to voice the book. Okay. That's where this was eventually going. I know that was a long roundabout way. And if you know me, and guys, I think we're all getting to know each other. You'll know a lot of times I'll diverge. I'm a former professor. You remember how professors always would do this? If you ever went to college classes, a professor would go off on some kind of weird tangent all the time. You remember that? And if they did, you were like, cool, we're not doing class stuff. But then in reality, it sucked because they still assigned the same homework. Jesse Divergence Coomer. There it is. Actually, I I was talking to my publisher. The people that work for this publisher, I got to say, are just super cool. And the word, I don't know how it came up in this meeting, but the word breath daddy came up, and I'm like, breath daddy. And so it's been this kind of inside joke amongst the people at the publisher. That's that's gonna be. They even had designs for t-shirts and hats. Yeah, well, should I? Maybe that's the merch that I need on the channel. And so I think it was because they were talking about some of the dad jokes that I can't help but tell, and they're like, you're just a breath daddy. So anyway, the book is on sale right now. If you haven't already purchased and you're thinking about purchasing, let me just ask you for the favor of just purchasing this week. And let me tell you why that is. It's because the ranking system for books, it's on a weekly basis, and it matters to me where it ranks, as far as if I would love to be able to say best-selling author Jesse Coomer, the breath daddy. But hey, so if you're on the fence, yeah, I'll order it next week. Hey, if you don't mind ordering it this week, I'd appreciate the breath daddy will thank you. I'll wave my fingers and heal your ills. But okay, getting to some and a movie trailer voice would be awesome. That would be, you know what? So they gave me 4 choices among of who should read the book: 2 male, 2 female. And I was thinking about, I was like, you know what? We could get real spicy. And it was there was an English woman's voice. And I thought, that is nothing. That's as far away from my voice as I think is possible. And so I was thinking about just, hey, let's get crazy with it. But then I was like, okay, no, I'm going to go with the dude. I'm going to, there is a certain degree of can you do an impression? Can you do a Jesse impression? And first of all, there is something very gratifying and weird about hearing a person do an impression of you. But it would be cool if the entire thing was epic movie trailer. Here, let me do a little reading, and then we're going to get to, I don't know, are we going to get to business? We've still got over a half hour before the breathwork session. And by the way, everyone's welcome on this breathwork session. It's a part of the Patreon club. So the breathwork is something that whenever you get the Zoom link, it's part of the Patreon club, and I will link it below. But you don't have to be a paying member of the Patreon club for this one time. All right, we're being really generous. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and link it right now, just in case you're not a part of the Patreon club and you want to get in on this. If you want to get in, if you want to get down with getting down, let's see here. Can I share this? And share. Oh, curses. I am not sure how to share this. I have an epic picture. Okay, here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to Patreon.com/Midwestern Method, and it will appear for free. So, and we're going to do breath work. That's language of breath style breath work. So I'm just writing that in the chat. Patreon.com. I have to say it out loud. I I can't think without doing that. Let's say Midwestern. I have to make that I have to make that voice and that face. This Western. Let's see, Western Method. There we go. And that will take you there. Midwestern Method. Yeah, I think I got that right. So patreon.com/Midwestern Method. That will take you to the free breathwork session. We're going to do we're going to do mixed techniques in the style of language of breath. The language of breath is a full philosophy. So it's not like it's like, hey, here's the one technique, right? It's language of breath. Everything I do now is, and sadly enough, I know we all want the simple fix, just tell me what to do, right? We all want that. And actually, I talk about that. There are conscious and unconscious forces at play, and your unconscious doesn't want to have to think critically. It doesn't want complexity. It just wants it simple. Give it to me simple. And that's why clickbait works. That's why we would rather, there's all kinds of research that shows that as soon as we know just barely enough to have an opinion on something, there are unconscious processes that happen that will discourage you from researching that thing further. So think about anything you have an opinion on. It's likely that you know just enough about that thing to form an opinion. I'm not just saying you, it's also me. This is part of being human. And I discuss this in great depth in the book. Now, it's not just, don't get me wrong, it's not a textbook, right? I mean, you'll get through this. It's like 240 pages. You're going to be able to get through it. But it's not just, hey, breath work is great. Here are techniques. It's really a deep dive into the conscious and the unconscious processes that we are, how they interface, how breathing is the thing that we can use as an interface, and then how to listen to all the different ways that the unconscious speaks to us. And it's not through language, right? The unconscious is a non-symbolic part of of what we are. So it cannot use words. And so it's really, okay. Anyway, you're invited. You're invited to I'm going to just like tell you let me just read the entire book real quick. No, anyway, you're invited to the breathwork session. And now, let's see here. I want to read just a little bit of it in a epic movie voice. Let's see here. Here it comes. In a book published in the 11th century called The Almanac of Health, it tells the story of an elderly man who went to the doctor one day complaining of achy joints and a general feeling of cold. After examining the patient, the doctor prescribed a rooster. That's literally the first two sentences of the book. Now you have to be intrigued at that, right? It's like, what the hell is he even talking about? Yeah. So what I do is I try to dismantle the mind-body paradigm, and I try to convince you to look at yourself in a new way. I'm just going to let you know that it's going to unlock your breathwork practice. And it's good stuff. Let's get to the questions for the Patreon club. And if you guys have any questions or Any comments? I'm loving all these comments I'm seeing here. Loving the faces and names that I'm seeing here. So thanks for hanging out with me on this Tuesday. It's Tuesday afternoon here in Indiana. I'm on the westernmost point of Eastern time. So literally like just a few, I would say no, not even a mile, like a half a mile that way is Central Time. And for those of you who are not from the United States, a half a mile is, I have no idea how far in kilometers. No one really knows. All right. So snoring. Snoring is something that happens more. And I didn't realize just how prevalent snoring was until I became a breath worker and I had so many people come to me complaining about their snoring issues. And let me tell you this, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've never had snoring issues. When I am incredibly tired, like insane, if I'm insanely tired or if I've been drinking, I snore too. And this is a thing that is very common among people. It's 0.8 kilometers. Thank you, Paul. I guess somebody knows. Google knows. Chat GPT knows. Maybe. Other than that, no one knows. Anyway, so snoring is incredibly common, and I didn't realize just how prevalent sleep apnea is. As a young, most of my life, whenever I heard about sleep apnea, and actually when I became a personal trainer, so I'm a nerd. So whenever I find out there's something that I'm interested in, I was injuring myself all the time doing weightlifting and stuff like that. And so I was like, I need to figure out how to not hurt myself all the time. I didn't get into fitness until I was 30. Like there was a lot of drugs and alcohol, mostly drugs, but also some alcohol up until I was 30, I guess 29 or 28. And then I was like, okay, I got to get my life together. So I started working out at the age of 30, which is approximately the time most people start to complain about getting hurt because they work out. So I had the best of both worlds. I was feeling better than ever before, but I was also getting injured. So I started down the road of personal training and I did all these certifications. And the thing that everybody told me was, if you have a client with sleep apnea, the best advice you can give them, okay, they probably smoke, so tell them to stop smoking. They're probably their BMI is probably excessive, right? Or they're very overweight. So tell them to lose weight. And that's going to be the only, those are the reasons, right? Those are the reasons why people have sleep apnea. And it's like, it was basically this thing where people would tell me that the only reason why a person would have sleep apnea is if they're overweight and they smoke. And then I began going down the breathwork track and I realized that's not the case. There are people with every body type. There are people who, I would say, I don't think I've ever worked with someone with sleep apnea who actually did smoke. I don't think I have, unless they didn't tell me they smoked. But and some of these people are incredibly healthy and they have sleep apnea. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might have sleep apnea. Now, this advice is coming back from a question from the Patreon club. If you are in the silver or above, you get to ask me any question you like, or just say, hey, talk about this topic. One time the topic was just making tones while breathing. And actually, we're going to talk about this in conjunction with snoring. But anyway, snoring often happens, especially later on in life. And we're not talking too much later on. We're talking about in your 30s, 40s, 50s. That's still young, just so you know. Okay, I'll be turning 43. I'm turning 43 this year in December. I don't know why I'm suddenly from the East Coast, but I don't know, that when I get old, maybe that's how I'll talk. Anyway, so there are multiple reasons why people snore. It's not like it's just one thing. So I had 3 different questions this month from the Patreon club about snoring and how to stop. So there's a few things really early on that you need to understand about snoring. One is that there's a lot of speculation, and I've seen this in my clients, but that especially if snoring happens later on in life, a lot of times it's actually, there are muscles, there's the structural integrity of your larynx that is at play. And this is where I love this. There's two studies, and I've mentioned these before. I tried mentioning them last time, but they link regular singing to cessation of snoring. And I can't tell you how happy I was when I found this information. And I've been singing more and more as a result. You can see these. I'm still going to come out with the greatest rock album of all time. It's coming. It's going to happen. Greatest rock album of all time will be done here. You will be the first. Yes, Sarah. It's actually okay. So snoring and singing. So there was a choir director in England who had this theory. She was convinced that if you were to sing 20 minutes a day, now she actually came out with a full like CD of songs so that you would work the right muscles to cease your snoring. And it was, I think she called it Singing for Snorers. And you can look this up. And oh my God, Paul, it may be a tribute. This is not the greatest song in the world. Anyway, back to the facts. So she came out with these CDs called Singing for Snorers, and it's basically, and she put it to the test. There was two papers that came out, one in the year 2000, the other in the year 2013. How nobody is talking about this, I don't know, but I was doing some research, as I am one to do, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are these issues with snoring? What are these issues with sleep apnea? There's a lot we can do with, for instance, CO2 tolerance training, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's so much cooler to say, you know what, another thing that's been shown to improve this, and in some cases, it completely stopped the snoring in some of these individuals that were part of the tests. But in everybody who did this 20 minutes a day for 3 months, it reduced or completely eliminated snoring. And in many people who had sleep apnea, it alleviated or at least reduced their symptoms of sleep apnea. Right? Oh my gosh. See, that's exactly. See, Sarah, if I would have known, we would have been singing 20, we would have actually done 20 minutes a day of singing just to make sure, because so I do a lot of different retreats. The most far out earthy, I would even go so far as to say hippie retreat that I do in a year is at a place called Mandala Springs. Some of you guys have seen Rob Linfesti. He's a friend of the channel. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other since 2016. He's kind of like, he's a genius. And he's got like this, he's a really beautiful person. When we go out there, we're kind of in his playground. We're out in the mountains at Mandala Springs. It is the dirtiest retreat. And yeah, dirty as in mud. Yeah. I mean, we're not like, it's not like we're talking like sailors or locker room. I mean, it's very free. It's also the most free, right? Yeah. Thank you for explaining, but it's also very free. I mean, that one is the one where it's unlike most, like I don't do, like every other retreat that I do is not really like that one, but I love Rob so much. And I need that retreat every year. And so anyway, the point is we had multiple people with sleep apnea at that event. And if only I would have known that the singing thing, I would have said, okay, guys, we're going to treat everybody's sleep apnea right now with some 20 minutes of singing every day. And we did. We had a lot of 90s songs. And that's my genre. And I am kind of happy that apparently 90s are back. 90s are back, baby. I'm going to break out my Jinkos, start sporting those Jinkos again. But anyway, yeah. So 20 minutes a day, it was shown that 20 minutes of singing per day for 3 months. Okay. After 3 months of 20 minutes of singing per day in both studies done, about a decade or so apart, in both studies, they showed a reduction in snoring, and they showed in many cases, it eliminated snoring, and there was an improvement in sleep apnea for many of the people who had sleep apnea in addition to their snoring. that blew me away. And so that is something that I'm doing more research on. You'll probably see an episode dedicated to that on the channel. I'm going to try to reach out to the woman who actually, she created a whole CD course. And if you just Google singing for snorers, she seems like she's a really nice person. And the songs you can tell the songs are hitting certain notes that are supposed to strengthen certain muscles in your larynx. So I was fascinated by that. Now, when it comes to snoring, there's also a lot of other things that we can do to mitigate our snoring. And that would be, of course, you want to make sure you're sleeping enough every night. So this is the things that generally cause me to snore, or the things that generally cause most people to snore. If you have a lot of sedatives before you go to bed, so for instance, alcohol, but also for those who take high doses of things that help them sleep, even melatonin, L-theanine, kava, all of these things that I like. I'm not saying these are bad things, but if you take too much, you can put yourself in a state where you're more likely to snore. And this can be something you can just reduce your intake, or kind of just work on how does this work with your physiology. But that is another thing. But if you're just not getting enough sleep, like when I'm just worn out, man, I've been working hard every day doing these retreats. I'm in the mud all the time with my friends on this one retreat. Maybe I'm basically boiling my skin off of my body, or I'm getting into cold streams, or who knows what I'm doing. There are times whenever I'm just so exhausted that I snore, and this is really common. So trying to get enough sleep each night is really helpful. Another thing is there is this issue of mouth taping. Now, this isn't necessarily a snoring cure. There are a lot of ways to snore, my friends, and it has less to do with your mouth being open and more to do with inflammation. Now, how does mouth taping connect to snoring cessation? Well, the less irritation, the less inflammation you have in your larynx, in your basically your throat hole, the less obstruction you're going to have, right? So this is where nasal breathing is incredibly important, not just when you sleep, but also throughout the day. So trying to do nasal breathing as often as you can, my friends, is key, especially as we go into the winter months, where in most parts of the northern hemisphere, we're going to have colder weather. That means a lot more heating, a lot drier air, a lot more irritants that are going to get up in there. And if you inhale those things, they can cause a lot of inflammation all the way down. But this right here, that's where the snoring happens, right? So we want to try to avoid any kind of irritation. Okay. And you're exactly right. Yeah. I know a lot of people who mouth tape and they still snore. And because you can have no mouth breathing, you don't even have to mouth tape, right? You just know, okay, I'm not a mouth breather at night, still snored. It's because it's here. There's a difference, right? And you can also snore up top too. There's a few different places you can snore. Now, one method of improving snoring is CO2 tolerance training, especially before bed. So a technique that I offer a lot of people in the language of breath, we call this the CO2 focused awareness exercise. I purposefully tried to name all of the sessions in the book something like that is just not that catchy. I don't know if it, then again, I also have sniff, sniff, poo in there. So I don't know. You tell me. But the sessions in there, maybe there's something for CO2. Maybe there's something for superventilation. These are all different variations of the foundational exercise, the awareness exercise. In about 15 minutes, we're going to start our breathing session, and we're going to start with the awareness exercise. Then we're going to kind of experiment with this and experiment with that, all the while using our awareness. Anyway, lastly, and then I need to answer a couple of these other questions before we got to get out of here. I just started talking. Sometimes the flow, it just flows. Yeah. So the last thing is you want to think about your pillow. You want to think about your positioning as you sleep. A lot of people have noticed that if they sleep on their back, I am a back sleeper. Okay. So judge me all you want, but I'm a back sleeper. But as long as my pillow is the right pillow and I'm not going like this, or I'm not like that, there you can sleep on your back and you should be able to breathe just fine. It needs to mimic something that mimics when you have good posture. And so having the right size pillow is key. Another thing you can do is sleep on your side. Even sleeping on the side, though, there's all these myths that you can't snore sleeping on your side. Well, I'm here to let you know sometimes it's going to happen. So all these things come into play. So the big takeaway though is because they all come into play, we just have to really have good larynx care, good basically throat care. If you do smoke, definitely don't smoke. If you have an issue where, hey, I know I've got way more body fat than I need. Okay, well, there are some issues that happen there. So we do want to try to be as healthy as we can. But lastly, and the last thing I want to say is that if you snore one night, don't judge yourself. A lot of people, they feel really guilty, and hey, no one really wants to sleep next to a snorer. Okay, all right. But you're human, you're working on yourself, and you're worth working on. So just do your best. Think about all these factors and maybe put together a perfect mix tape to sing to. What's your favorite song to sing along to? For me, it is definitely Pearl Jam or Stone Temple Pilots. I wish I could sing Soundgarden, but I don't know how. Chris Cornell, like way up there, the entire song. So anyway, the next question, I'm going to speed through these next two questions, but I want to make sure to get them covered. You want to hang upside down? So yeah, vampires. Hey, it is Halloween, right, Paul? So vampires tend to not have a snoring problem. And a lot of people think it's because they drink blood, but it's actually because they sleep in coffins. So suddenly people start kind of, they start calling it the funeral home. I got this terrible snoring problem. Could I take a look at your coffins? I've heard that it does something for let's start that trend. Next thing you know, there's going to be like all these different brands that you'll see on Instagram. Hey, do you have a snoring problem? One simple trick. Just get a coffin. I can just see those commercials now. All right, enough. I've got to answer these questions. Then we're going to go breathe together. Okay. Two people asked questions this month about, hey, when I'm nervous, when I'm stressed, I notice that I cannot think very well. I can't seem to think straight. And one of them is a student who is in his first semester of college. And hey, as a former English professor, I just have to let you know the second half of the semester is way harder than the first half. Those of you guys who went to college, I mean, right, am I right? Like the first half of the semester, if you ever go to college, the first half of your semester, you're like, there's no homework. I don't think this isn't going to be that hard of a course. This is nothing. And then by the time you get to midterm, you're just like, how am I going to get through all of this? I'm so far behind. And the reason for, I got to answer the question. I'm just kind of in a talky mood today. I don't know. Anyway, why is it that we can't think very well when we're nervous? So and of course, this goes back to stuff that I explain in the book. We are not organisms that were designed to sit in a place and philosophize. What I'm doing right now is not incredibly natural. I'm doing an unnatural act. No, what we tend to like we use our brains in a different way than what they were originally used for the vast majority of human history. There are what we call psychotechnologies that developed, and we just think they're just normal. But the way that we use our brain now is not necessarily the same way it was originally used. So that's a long way of me saying we are organisms of action. This is if I have one message in my book and just my coaching now, is that you are an organism of action. Every cell in you, head to toe, understands this. Every cell that you have understands that your purpose is to take action in the face of whatever it is that you're doing. That's how it all works together. 37.2 trillion cells working together to take actions. That is our strategy for survival. That is what our organism naturally is trying to do at every moment of every day. And when you are in danger, when you are under stress, that organism that you are naturally says, what do we do when we are under threat? What do? We take action. All of this primal programming, if you will. I hate using that word because it makes us seem like we're machines. I don't like that anymore. I used to think myself as a machine. I do not want people to look at themselves as a machine anymore. But that's what happens. And so every cell within you, and then this happens multiple layers of your psychology, will say, we need to take physical action in this case, because that is the answer to pretty much every problem for most of human history. It is not to remember your chemistry information on the test. It is to charge. It is to run. It is to sometimes get in the zone and take some kind of physical action. That is what all of you expects to do. And so it will start to shut down parts of you that are in charge of critical thinking, that are in charge of executive thinking. And that is when parts of you will start to shut down. And sadly enough, that's your critical thinking parts. That is the part of you that's where you kept the name of the person you can't remember in that right there. I know you, but I can't think of your name. That's what happens, because there is a part of you that says we need to take physical action now. And so it starts to shut down parts of you and turn on other parts of you. And the problem is that the prefrontal cortex is the first thing that will start to shut down when you become activated. And that is why we have a hard time concentrating or thinking straight when we are under those situations. So when I work with first responders, these are people who we expect, okay, I'm bleeding out. I was in a car accident and there's fire all over the place. Hey, firefighter and EMT and first responders of all kinds, help me know what to do with this intricate whatever situation I'm in whenever all hell is breaking loose. And so when I work with the Breathwork Tactics program, is a program I have for first responders, we work with, okay, we need to break through these natural processes and start to form a kind of ultimately a reset. And no, it's not sitting down for 15 minutes to do circular breathing. We have to be able to do this quickly. We have to be able to do this without becoming dizzy and not being able to drive, because they're doing this as they go to the place. They do it as they're helping the person, as there's explosions and people who want to do them harm. So this is a natural thing about being human. There is no cure to it, but there are tools that we can use, and breathwork is the primary tool that you can use to start to get this under control and balanced. And this is quite literally what I talk about in the book. Okay. And so to understand these processes more deeply, take a look at the book. Lastly, how should I breathe when I'm exercising? The most important thing is, what kind of exercise are you doing? If you're lifting weights, it doesn't matter quite so much. Now, I know some people, the form police there's always, there's always those people out there that are just like, the form police. And if you're in the gym and you have some kind of improper form, they'll come up to you like, I can't believe you did that way. What I mean by this is, yes, it matters how you're breathing, but it matters more that you're breathing. The most common thing I see when a person is doing weight training is apneas. They will, right? And it's like, okay, you need to continue breathing while you're doing these reps. And the reason why people do that, the natural inclination, is because they're trying to brace. And when we brace, a lot of times we lock up our core. This is something that you'll see in people who have experienced trauma or people that are in incredibly stressful careers. They will have a very difficult time relaxing their core because they've been bracing all day. And when you brace all day, you're protecting your internal organs, and you're getting ready for some kind of impact. Well, of course, you're bracing because you want structural integrity. That's fine. But just try to remember to breathe while you're doing it. And during those things, I'm not so picky on if it's nasal or if it's mouth breathing. Now, I would prefer nasal breathing, but just as long as you're breathing. Now, on the other hand, how you breathe does make a difference. We don't have enough time to get into all the mechanical aspects of it. I cover it in my book, and maybe we'll talk about it on another episode. Lastly, when you're breathing with athletic breathing, actually, I cover what my recommendations are. I have a gear system that's based off of basically what I have learned from Brian McKenzie, who actually, hey, Brian McKenzie wrote the foreword to my book. He's elite human performance trainer. He actually takes it even deeper. But for my athletes, I've just come down to 3 gears. And this seems to work really well. And I don't like to make it incredibly complicated for people. Ultimately, you want to breathe through your nose as long as you can. When you can't breathe through your nose anymore, if it's just you've got too much of a load, a physiological load, you switch to inhales through the nose, exhales through the mouth. When you can't do that anymore, and that should just be whenever you're at the very hardcore finish, then mouth breathing in and out is appropriate. And that shouldn't be very much of the session. Most of the session should be in through the nose, out through the mouth, because you should be pushing yourself. When I train people, I want them to be pushing themselves. If all you're doing is inhaling and exhaling through the nose, it means you probably have more gas in the tank and you could probably push yourself a little harder. Yes, people love to show off that they tape their mouth shut whenever they exercise. But in my opinion, that means you're not actually trying hard enough. If you are an athlete and you really want to win, and you're just breathing through the nose, that's fantastic for a lot of it. Like if you're running and stuff, like when you're training. But I want you pushing yourself really hard. In through the nose, out through the mouth is generally what I would recommend for most athletic pursuits. Now, having said that, I can see it's only 3 minutes till the hour, and it is time for our breathwork session. So if you go to patreon.com/Midwestern Method, I'm just going to type that in here one more time. We're going to breathe together. Let's see here. Patreon.com Midwestern Method. There it is in the chat. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you guys in just a few minutes. We'll breathe together. Oh, also check out the book. Get it today. Bye-bye.